Hello, my name is Winston Wu, founder of HappierAbroad.com. Today I'm going to be talking about three taboo truths in America and the overseas solution to them. Now, they're taboo because even though they're true, you aren't supposed to be talking about them. They're very politically incorrect, and there's a negative stigma in doing so. And so they're not usually talked about, at least not publicly. But they do affect a lot of people's lives, and so for that reason, I think they should be exposed and brought attention to, and that's what we're going to do right here. Um, and then I'll be talking about why the overseas solution so far is the best and most reliable and consistent remedy to these taboo truths that work for any average decent person. So let's begin. Taboo truth number one: there is no sense of human connection in America. Now, this is something very obvious that you can see in public. Um, you can go to any public setting or scene in the U.S. or Canada and see that people are basically isolated in bubbles. There's a psychological wall around people. It's not so much physical as psychological. There's a segregation of people into these bubbles, and that makes it really hard to meet people because there's an isolation mentality, and between strangers there's like this ice wall, and that's why when you're meeting someone for the first time or trying to chat up a stranger in America, there's a term called breaking the ice with a stranger because um, it assumes that there's an ice wall between strangers, which means that there's basically a barrier between people, and that makes it really hard to meet people because there's no sense of natural connection or inclusiveness um, by default between people. And so that makes it difficult as well as unnatural to meet people, and that's why most people in America don't feel very confident and comfortable about meeting people because they're conditioned to feel that it's an awkward thing, and so when they feel awkward about meeting people, then other people feel awkward about meeting them, and then it snowballs into a very antisocial, isolationist society, and that's what the U.S. and Canada basically is. And some say the UK is like that too, but I haven't been there yet, so I can't comment. And so basically, I mean, people have this paranoid mentality that everyone out there could be dangerous, and so it's better to keep to yourself and to keep, I mean, your interactions only with people that you know. Um, Essentially, in America, every man is an island, and most people don't know their neighbors even, which is very uncommon in the rest of the world. It's an aberration, in fact. And when you're alone in a crowded place, even if there's a lot of people around you or a packed stadium or whatever, you basically feel all alone because there's no sense of connection at all between you and other people. And that's very obvious in America. And it's not really about me or how attractive I am or who I am, really, because even as a third person, even if you were an invisible ghost or something, you can still see this as a third person because, I mean, that's just how people are. They're like that to each other, not just to me. I mean, basically, in America, strangers don't talk to each other unless it's business related. So that means most of the time when you go out in America, if you're alone, then you stay alone because you don't just go out and meet people. I mean, the movies make it look that way, make it look that easy, but in real life, it's not that way. In real life, people mind their own business, and they expect you to mind their own business too. That's reality. What you see in the movies about Americans being so sociable and chatty and meeting people here and there, left and right, I mean, that's really fiction. I mean, in reality, people mind their own business and don't talk to you unless there's a business reason or you're asking directions or whatever. And that's basically the way it is. And you can just see that anywhere. I mean, people that have denied this, even I mean, I've shown it to them firsthand because you can see this. It's as obvious as the blue sky. Yet, because it's taboo to talk about this, some people deny it and will try to contradict it just because it's taboo to talk about it, even though it's obvious and you can just see it everywhere. And that's really awkward because, I mean, something as obvious as the blue sky, I mean, should be, I mean, you should be allowed to identify it or acknowledge it without there being some negative stigma toward it. But in this case, it's like you're programmed not to see this reality that Americans are antisocial and paranoid of each other and isolationists. Instead, if you have a complaint of a social or psychological nature, you're programmed to blame yourself, not society or anyone else. So that means that there's an assumption that society is normal and healthy, and that the only problem are the individuals. And that is a very big fallacy because that is not true. And I'll explain more why that is later on. But for now, I'd like to give you an example of what I'm talking about. Here are some pictures I took on the Seattle ferry once, and you can see the isolationist mentality of the people in the photos. Now, contrast that with these photos I took on a ferry in Riga, Latvia, located in Eastern Europe. Note the difference. So you see, in one ferry, you have people isolated and just ignoring each other's existence altogether in this bubble, the Seattle one. And in the other, you have in the Eastern Europe ferry, you can see that people are dancing and mingling and they're having a little mini disco on the ferry and they're just interacting because interacting in most countries is natural. It flows. It's normal. People there isn't so much of an ice barrier. People open up and socialize with people even if they don't know you, like they already know you. So that's the way it is naturally in most of the world. Um, and groups are more inclusive in other countries too, whereas in America they're much more closed. When most people go out in America, they tend to only socialize within the group that they're with or with the friend that they're with. They they limit their interactions within that group. Um, so basically, the average person does not have that many opportunities to meet people in America. I mean, obviously, and people are kind of superficial, like, um, and difficult to connect with. When they greet each other, there's usually a fake plastic smile, and a hi, how are you, and then you got to answer, oh, I'm fine, I'm great, how about yourself, and there's a fake superficial greeting between people that just gets them by, but it's not really. I mean, there's no sense of human connection in such a greeting. There's no real bonding. It's just a artificial smile and greeting. Um, okay, let's go on to number two now. Taboo truth number two: dating and relationships for men in America are a total nightmare. Now, this is an even bigger taboo than number one because in America there's this unspoken, unofficial rule where any time you compare men and women, you always have to put the women on top or put them in a better light somehow. And you see this in the movies and in comedians, like when a man and a woman are playing a game in the movies, they always have to show the woman making the winning move because it's just one of those unspoken rules. Um, but we're not here to be politically correct. We're here to tell the truth, so we're going to have to break this taboo. So sorry if that offends anyone out there. But seriously, the dating scene in America is a complete nightmare. I mean, trying to get dates in America for single guys is like the most unnatural thing you can imagine. Totally. Um, First of all, the women are very unapproachable. They're defensive, paranoid. They think they're too good for men. And they have this inner psychological resistance toward relationships with men. And it's like they don't even need them, and they push them away psychologically. And the whole male female dynamic is just totally out of whack. Um, and the females in America nowadays are not even sweet or feminine. They don't look feminine. They don't act feminine. They don't giggle or blush when you compliment them like females do in most of the world. Um, and they also have this princessy, off-chart sense of entitlement too. Um, so it's just really there's just so many factors going against the single man in America, and practically every single male in America who has gone abroad and dated abroad has said has reported much better experiences overseas than in the U.S. Um, in general, men in America don't even feel wanted or needed, and niceness doesn't even count. Um, if you're nice to someone, they either take it for granted or it's used against them, especially in the dating scene. Because if you're too nice to a female, she thinks, I mean, she uses that against you. She sees that as being needy or desperate or something, and that's really dysfunctional because, in my book, um, if you're faulted for being too nice, then you're in a really dysfunctional society. Um, Anyways, regardless of whether what I'm saying is sexist or misnogamist or misnogamist or chauvinistic, of course, that has nothing to do with any of these things. But regardless of what you think about what I'm saying, the truth is the truth, and a lot of guys, including me, know from firsthand experience that the dating scene is better overseas, and and another thing that I found is that there are more dateless males in America than there are in any other country I've ever been in. Period. And that right there says a lot. So the facts are the facts, regardless of how taboo this all is. Um, the fact is, us guys who go overseas and date overseas have a better experience. That's what we report. That's what we know firsthand. And it doesn't matter if the feminists call us names for saying this or put labels on us like chauvinist or misnogamist or sexist. That doesn't change the truth. So there you have it. Taboo truth number 3. The culture in America undermines your self-worth and sanity. In other words, the American culture and environment are not good for your mental health, your psychological wholeness, balance, or self-esteem. Basically, for some reason, you're bred to feel inadequate and insecure and like you're not good enough, and that you need something else. Some say that that's a ploy for getting people to overconsume and overwork, and that could be, but regardless of the reasons, there's definitely something in America that makes you feel insecure and unworthy and that really affects your confidence and self-esteem. So to put someone in an environment where they're persecuted and undermined in terms of their self worth, and then to blame them for it is really cruel. But unfortunately, that's what happens in America, and that's what I went through during my childhood years and teen years as well. Um, yeah, I was placed in a very dysfunctional culture and environment where people brought me down, and then when I suffered for that, from lack of confidence or self-esteem, I was blamed for that. When in reality, it wasn't even my fault. It was the dysfunctional atmosphere around me. So it's a whole victim blaming um, thing that really I want to expose, because there's a lot of people suffering psychologically in America who think that the problem is them, when in reality it's the society, and the society is in denial. It's blind to its own faults, and it 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 programs you to think that society is normal and blameless and healthy, and that only individual people who suffer are to be blamed. So it's this mass programming that is essentially a lie, and it deflects the blame from society toward the individual, and and I think that's just plain wrong. Um, and of course, and the culture is also really fake and artificial, and you feel like you can't be yourself, and you always have to maintain this facade that everything's great, otherwise there's something wrong with you. um, so that's why, like when you're in an office environment, or you see acquaintances in America, they always have to say, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And you always have to respond, "Oh, I'm not too bad. How about yourself?" Or "Oh, I'm great. How about you?" Because everyone has to maintain a facade that everything is great, and so they have to pretend, regardless of what the reality is, and that is a fake social mask, that just causes you to suppress who you really are and how you really feel, because it's all this fake exterior and facade that you have to put out in American culture, and that's why the people who tend to thrive in American culture, social culture that is, um, who tend to be the most popular and stuff, they tend to act the most fake, because in order to thrive in a fake culture, you have to become fake. You have to be you have to talk in a very artificial manner, not a very sincere manner like I'm doing now. You've got to put on this bravado, artificial way of talking, um, in order to fit in and thrive in American social culture, in order to be hip and cool and be popular. I mean, you got to be fake, not real. And that's another sign of dysfunctionality in America. Um, and so, due to all this, a lot of people end up having inferiority complexes. And to compensate for that, they develop all kinds of extreme personalities. They brag, they fluff and huff, they boast about achievements that aren't true. They just act in all kinds of phony ways to cover up this insecurity inside that the society in America has given them. And that's a very unfortunate thing, but again, this is not talked about in America because it's taboo to bring attention to the dysfunctional culture in America. Everyone is taught to blame themselves, not the society. So this problem, in the fake artificial social culture that brings you down, is not addressed because you're programmed not to see it. And again, that's wrong. That's a lie. I mean, the culture is definitely dysfunctional, and you see that everywhere. It's in the vibes. Everyone knows so many dysfunctional people, especially if you live in California or along the coast, because that's where people are the most materialistic in America. And that's where the rat race is strongest. Um, and all of this fragments who you are, your psychological wholeness and balance. Um, One interesting thing I've heard is that in terms of black people, if you look at the African Americans in America versus the African Americans in England, for example, you notice a difference in that the blacks in America tend to have this inferiority complex that they're constantly struggling to compensate for against so much racism that they experience their whole lives, which is not their fault, of course. It's the U.S. racist culture. Um, but if you look at the blacks in England, you'll notice that they're very well adjusted. They're cool, they're calm. I mean, they don't have this inferiority complex that they do in the States, because England is a lot less racist toward them and persecutory toward them. I mean, there's a lot less of a racial stigma toward minorities and interracial dating in Britain than in America. I mean, a lot of honest people who have been to both will tell you that. And so that's another interesting comparison example that you rarely hear about because, again, all of this is taboo. It's real, but you aren't supposed to talk about it or see it. And and it's amazing that I'm like one of the few people out there that will talk about it because it's just so obvious to me, like the blue sky. Yet everyone has this zombie conditioning where they don't see it. It's almost like the Twilight Zone or something. Now, the implications of all this are that these three taboo truths I've described culminate into making America one of the worst places in the world for dating, social life, and mental health, and explain why it has such a high rate of mental illness and loneliness. And if you look up the statistics, you'll see that the US does have the highest rates of mental illness and loneliness in the industrialized world, and possibly the world, I think, as well. Um, and given these three taboo truths that I just described, I mean, it's not surprising. But the problem is that, I mean, they're basically unacknowledged because society turns a blind eye to it, like we mentioned. Um, and if you talk about these kind of things, if you complain about your relationships or your self confidence or your or how many friends you have or getting dates or whatever, I mean, it makes you look like a loser to even complain about these things. So people don't dare to. I mean, it's something you got to keep to yourself, you know, because you'll be condemned if you talk about these things. They're very taboo and politically incorrect, especially the number two about the dating scene one. So instead, you're programmed to blame yourself if you have a problem. The problem is always in the individual, not the society. That's what you're programmed to believe. So basically, you're taught that society is normal and healthy, and that only individuals can be dysfunctional and sick. And that's a major fallacy. You know why? Um, because the proof that the problem is not with us, the people who are lonely and dateless in America, the proof that we're not the problem is the fact that when we go overseas and experience a much more natural and healthy social and dating environment, all these problems in our relationships and mental health alleviate. They're gone. Um, all of a sudden, we feel good about ourselves. We meet quality women. We feel fulfilled. Um, I mean, everything just feels much more harmonious and natural, and it's so much easier to meet people. So the fact that our problems disappear and those areas are much better when we go overseas to other environments and cultures outside the U.S. I mean, that right there says that the problem was not us, but in the dysfunctional society of the U.S. and Canada. So that is very telling right there, and that debunks the fallacy that, oh, the problem is always you. It's always in the individual who doesn't fit in, and this right there debunks that. And for any of those, for anyone suffering, I mean, being persecuted from this victim blaming mentality in the U.S., I mean, that's something to tell them. That's an important point that refutes the programmed victim blaming mentality that a lot of Americans have. So basically, what that means is that the good news about all this, about all these taboo truths, is that in most overseas countries out there, these three dysfunctional conditions are the opposite. They're reversed. And let me go over some of that to try to summarize. Number one, there's a natural sense of social connectedness in most countries. This means that you feel a natural connection with other people. You don't feel segregated into some bubble, some artificial bubble. You feel like there's a sense of togetherness, and meeting people is a lot more natural, and it happens with the flow. I mean, you don't. I mean, unless they're really shy, you don't have to depend on introductions. You can meet people in public places, just normal, everyday public places. You'll meet people, chat people up. I mean, you'll get invited places. Um, the social atmosphere is just so much more inclusive compared to the U.S. and Canada. So, I mean, in between strangers, there's not this ice barrier like there is in America or Canada. There's no ice barrier. Instead, when strangers talk to each other, there's this instant familiarity, where you act like you already know each other, even if you don't, because people are just comfortable talking to other nice, normal people out there, and that's the way it should be. I mean, why should there be this paranoia and the keep away from me, don't bother me attitude that exists in the U.S. and Canada, and some say it's in the U.K. too, but it's just not natural or normal. And so in other countries, when you go out alone, even if you go there and you don't know anyone, it's really easy to meet people. And when you go out alone, you can meet people easily too. I mean, you don't have to stay alone. So there's not this loser stigma with going out by yourself. Like in America, where if you go out alone, you don't meet people, especially if you're a guy, and no one wants to talk to you. I mean, that just sucks. I mean, it's totally different from what they show you in the movies, where everyone in America is all friendly and chatty and sociable. I mean, in real life, it's not like that. In real life, in America, people mind their own business, and they don't talk to you if they don't know you, unless it's business related. So strangers don't talk to each other unless it's business related in conservative countries like America. Um, but in most countries, strangers will talk to you just for the joy of meeting people. And this is, I'm not saying this is true everywhere, but in probably most or many countries, that's true. Um, it's very easy to meet people. It's natural. You don't have to try. Even if you're shy, it's still easy to meet people because you don't feel this suppression of who you are. You feel like you're allowed to be who you are. You're allowed to be more outgoing. Because in America, you kind of feel suppressed, like who you are has to be placed into this tight bubble, of appropriateness, where you don't, where you mind your own business and you work and consume, and you don't bother anyone, and you don't talk to anyone unless it's business related. That's the real U.S. social life, but it's not like that in a lot of other countries. Okay, number two, dating and relationships are more natural and healthy. And again, that's a big one, because of course having quality relationships is an important thing. Basically, the females in most countries, they look and act feminine. They dress feminine, they behave feminine, they're sweet, they're modest, and that makes them a lot more pleasant to get along with. And to a guy, that's very, very refreshing. I mean, it's like they're a different breed. And once you experience this, you'll say to yourself, "My God, where have I been all this time?" I mean, this is how women should be. This is how God intended women to be, and you'll realize that when you go to other countries where women act like women, and there's a lot of other countries out there where they do. Um, and it's a fallacy to assume that America is the world and that everything in America is the same as the rest of the world, and that women are all like that. No way, no, absolutely not. Um, and when you compliment a girl in other countries, she'll appreciate it. She'll giggle. She'll blush. Whereas in America, you'll hardly ever see a girl giggle and blush anymore. No way. It's totally does not fit in anymore to the way females act. And most important of all, the females in other countries are generally more approachable and easier to meet. They don't think every guy is a creep out there, or that anyone who has desires for them must be a creep or a criminal or a predator. So what that means is you're allowed to be a guy. You can flirt with girls. You can show that you have interest. You can appreciate their beauty, and that's okay. That's normal. I mean, it's normal to have desires for females. I mean, as long as you don't, transgress their rights, of course. But why can't a guy, be interested in female beauty? I mean, I am. So why should a guy feel like he's a creep or a criminal, like in the U.S., just for having desires? I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's really dysfunctional. But in other countries, it's not like that, fortunately. And so girls are a lot easier to meet. I mean, it doesn't mean you're gonna necessarily find Miss right away, or your soulmate. But meeting girls and flirting with them and making friends with them is just a really fun and rewarding process in other countries. It's not awkward and creepy like in the States, and that's the important thing. And so women are not brought up to hate men in other countries. I mean, instead they dream of having a guy to give love to give support to, and to give companionship to. And that's exactly what they give you if they really like you. If they love you, they'll give you love, support, and companionship. Um, and that's what a man needs. So the male-female dynamic is much more natural and harmonious, and much more in line, and much more fulfilling as well. And to a man, what that means is that you feel a lot more valued, more appreciated, more wanted, and needed. And that does wonders for your self-esteem, because, I mean, every guy, needs to feel that they're wanted and appreciated, and needed. Because what guy wants to wake up every day knowing that he's not needed? I mean, it's awful. So it's nice to be needed and wanted for a change. Um, and so, and not only that, but when you're nice to a female, I mean, it actually counts. I mean, niceness counts in other countries. It's rewarded. And I'm not talking about the business world where it's competitive and dog eats dog world. I'm talking about relationships between men and women and the male-female dynamic. I mean, niceness counts in that setting in most countries. It's rewarded, and that's how it should be. And that fact alone tells you that it's natural, because niceness should be naturally rewarded and reciprocated with niceness in return. And niceness is being nice is a good character. It's a good characteristic trait. I mean, but if you're in a dysfunctional society like the U.S., the niceness is used against you. You can be told you're too nice and have it used against you, and women will use that to say, "Oh, you're some desperate creep, and you're weak and needy." And niceness is not about being weak and needy. It's just about wanting to be a good person to other people, and that's fine. That's okay. Only in a dysfunctional society like the U.S. would that be used against someone and used to bring someone down. I mean, that's just so dysfunctionally messed up. I mean, that's a key telling point right there. That niceness is not a good thing in the U.S. It's used against you. It's you're told you're weak and needy and desperate if you're nice, and it shouldn't be that way. So that's another sign of dysfunction. Number three, you feel accepted, whole, and good about yourself. And what that means is that I mean, for your mental health, there's a much more balanced feeling of yourself and of your wholeness, because there's a natural sense of oneness between you and your environment and with other people around you. There's and you feel that within yourself too, a sense of wholeness and oneness, like you're allowed to be who you are, and so the real you can come out and flourish because it's not suppressed into this it's not suppressed into this shy shell that you feel in the U.S. Again, even if you're shy, I mean, you'll naturally feel outgoing in most other countries because it's easy to be outgoing in other countries, because you're allowed to be who you are, and you feel accepted. There's a feeling of acceptance, like you can be who you are. You don't have to conform to this really fake artificial standard for how you're supposed to be, which and then if you don't, then you feel insecure. And all of that leads to inferiority complexes, of course. But overseas, you don't have to be that way, so there's no need to develop any inferiority complexes. You feel normal and complete. And here's one example. What people who've been to the U.S. and to England will tell you is that they notice a difference in the black people there. In the U.S., black people tend to have this inferiority complex where they're constantly offended easily. They're trying to they get overly defensive if they interpret you being racist toward them, and so they develop a defensive personality to compensate for their inferiority complex due to all the racism they experience in the U.S., which is not their fault, of course. I mean, the U.S. is a very socially racist country, and also racially segregated as well. But if you go to England, you'll notice that the black people don't have this inferiority complex. They seem a lot more healthy and well-adjusted and whole, and that's because in England there's not so much racism and prejudice against them. They're treated like normal human beings, and so as a result, they integrate a lot better into society. They're not defensive or and they don't get offended so easily, because in England, there's a lot less racism. There's I mean, even in interracial dating, there's a lot less of a negative stigma toward that. I mean, people are much more open about dating other races in England, and it's not criticized or condemned like it is in the U.S. So you'll notice, that difference right there between the black people in the U.S. and the black people in Britain, and that's one example of how in other countries you feel much more natural and good about yourself, so and well adjusted, and that is really a key ingredient in good mental health. Feeling good about yourself, feeling whole and one and natural, and feeling accepted for who you are. I mean, that is crucial to mental health, and so that's why I say mental health is better overseas than it is in the U.S. because of factors such as that. So, given all this, I mean, the ultimate question you have to ask yourself is, which of these two social environments that I've described would you be happier in? I mean, the dysfunctional U.S. environment that I described, or the social environment that most countries have. I mean, which one would you be happier in? That's something you got to ask yourself eventually. And you should feel lucky that you found this this video and know about my website now, because most Americans never hear about these comparisons and these taboo truths, um, because they're denied and taboo. So most people never hear about it, and they don't hear about it from their friends. They definitely don't hear about it on the media, and usually when they're browsing the internet, they don't run into this website, because there are very few websites out there that talk about this, and mine is one of the few. And so most people don't hear about it. So if you should consider yourself lucky to be one of the few that know about this. But this is all just something for you to consider. I mean, it may not apply to your life. I mean, if you're happy in the U.S. and you don't care about relationships or mental health, and then all you care about is your career and your money in the U.S., I mean, it doesn't apply to everyone. I mean, nothing applies to everyone. I mean, there's no lifestyle that or culture that applies to everyone, that where everyone fits in. But the reality is, there are a lot of people like me, like myself, who value dating, relationships, and mental health as a top priority. I mean, it's important to have good quality relationships and to feel good about yourself. Like I said, those are important parts of life, and a lot of people realize that, and a lot of people are not happy in those areas in America. And so for those people, I mean, this is something for them to consider. I mean, they should know about this, because they don't know, most of them don't know about it. So that's why I want to bring this attention to the people that this could benefit from. So it's definitely something, to consider, and, for at least, for you to know about at least. And that's why I'm here, and that's why my website, Happier Abroad, is here, to disseminate these life-changing truths to those in need, which may be you. And the reason I'm so passionate about this and started this movement and website is because I know from firsthand experience that once you go abroad and experience all this, your life is changed forever, guaranteed. It's like you're reborn again, and that's what motivates me. That's what drives me to say all this and to work on my website, which has a lot of content on there about this. If this applies to you, if you're interested, if it means something to you, then I invite you to come to my website at happierabroad.com. You'll find the link to it in the description box on the right-hand side of this video. Come join our online community or the forum and ask any questions you want. I participate there too, so you can ask me questions and other people too, and you can contact me through there too, or just come and ask a question and share your comments or views, whatever. And my site has a lot of content for you to browse: photos, videos, articles, testimonials. You'll see it all linked on the homepage. And it's all very straightforward and easy to understand and unambiguous. So it's a very easy site to follow through. I simply tell it like it is. I don't BS anyone or beat around the bush. So with that, I'd like to say in closing that if you're a lonely, dateless guy in America, come to Happier Abroad, and we'll give you hope, validation, and a proven overseas solution that has led people like you to love, social connectedness, and personal fulfillment overseas, becoming happier abroad. So, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you online. Bye now.